Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite books that I've read so far this year. I have read 95 books as of filming this video, and I've collected my top 10 favorite books out of all of those. So we're just going to be going through those. These are in no particular order. I really don't know exactly what is my number one favorite book. I love all of these so much, and they're all very different. So the first one, actually the most recent addition to this list, is Hearthstone by L. Catherine White. This book is essentially Pride and Prejudice but with dragons. It is a Pride and Prejudice retelling where Darcy is a legendary dragon rider and Elizabeth and her family are being attacked by these griffins. So they hire a band of dragon riders to come and take care of the griffin problem, and while they're there, Elizabeth and Darcy have their romance. It is very much the same plot as Pride and Prejudice, except some extra fantasy elements to it. It has a lot of whimsy. There's cute magical creatures in it, talking dragons who I loved, and also some very epic battle scenes. I loved the romance in here. I'm a huge Pride and Prejudice fan, so I feel like this was tailored perfectly for me, and I just fell in love with it. I think if you do love Pride and Prejudice and you also love fantasy books, this is like a must read. It was so perfect. And this is actually a book that I've owned for many years, and I'm like kicking myself that I hadn't read it yet. Next up, we have a book that I've actually read twice this year, and that is Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series. Book one, Flawless, was one of my favorite romances of last year, and this is definitely going to be one of my favorite romances of this year. The first time that I read this book, I gave it 4.5 stars, but when I reread it, I upped it to a 5-star. This book is following Willa and Cade. Cade is a single father, and he's sort of always had a ton of responsibility, and his family is highly encouraging him to hire a nanny to help him out with his son, but he's super resistant to it because he just doesn't like accepting help from anybody. So in comes Willa, who becomes his nanny. They are just such a perfect pair. I said this in my vlog where I read this book that I do struggle with nanny romances a lot because oftentimes it feels like there's this like male character who's just like kind of incompetent, and all he wants is a mommy to like come in and clean for him and cook for him and take care of him and his kids. I don't love that vibe. So what I loved so much about this is that Cade is very responsible. He is a great father. He's not looking for someone to be a mommy, and he's actually very resistant to Willa helping him out. Like many times throughout the book, he tells her not to cook for him, not to clean, not to do laundry. Like she's just there to watch his son when he's not around, and I just feel like they were like such an amazing match. There's also a level of like maturity and communication that they have in this book that I just really appreciated. So this is definitely my favorite romance that I've read this year. All right, next up we have Out There by Kate Folk. This is a collection of short stories that are all kind of speculative, and I've always sort of compared this book to Black Mirror. I think if you like Black Mirror, you could enjoy this short story collection. The stories in here are so weird and vast ranging that I don't even know how I would sum them up, but what I really liked about this collection is that there are connections throughout the stories. Specifically, the starting story and the ending story are connected, and I really liked how they bookended the collection. I'm usually not a fan of short story collections because I feel like they are hit or miss, but this one was mostly a hit for me. I had so many stories in here that I just really loved. Specifically, there's one story in here called The Bone Ward, which is about this medical condition where people's bones will spontaneously dissolve, and they need to be kept in these chambers until their bones re-solidify. That one was so wild and interesting. So if you're looking for a short story collection with very weird, out there stories, I would highly recommend this one. The next book is Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. This is the 8th book in the Wayward Children series. This should come as no surprise to you. These books are always on my favorites list, and this one might actually be my favorite of the series. This is a fantasy series about these magical doorways that children pass through to enter these different magical worlds. And this book in particular is following Antoinette, who had a very traumatic childhood. This book deals with childhood sexual assault, grooming, gaslighting. It's very heavy in the beginning, but she passes through this doorway that basically acts as like a traveling house. So she gets to travel to a lot of different worlds. It very much has like a Howl's Moving Castle vibe to it, which I loved. So this is probably one of my favorite books in the series, and I just can't believe we're 8 books into a series and I'm still finding new favorites. Next up, we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This also should come as no surprise because I've talked endlessly about how much I loved this book. If for some reason you live on another planet and you have never heard of Fourth Wing, one, I don't believe you, but this book is about an academy where people go to train to become dragon riders. There are a certain level of trials that they must compete in order to be granted status of becoming a dragon rider and get bonded to a dragon. So we are following Violet, who is a character that has a chronic illness, and she was originally meant to be a scribe, but her mother forces her to go to the Rider Academy, and everyone thinks that she is going to die immediately, that she's not going to pass the trials, that she does not have what it takes to be a writer. I just love this book. Is it a perfect book? No. But was it so much fun? Yes, and this book honestly reminded me why I fell in love with reading. It brought me back to that nostalgia of like reading Divergent or The Hunger Games for the first time, and I just genuinely had the best time reading it. I do understand some of the criticisms for this book. However, I do not care. I just had so much fun reading this. I loved it so much. The way that I am like salivating at the mouth for the sequel, I cannot wait. The next book is The World Gives Way by Marissa Levian. This is actually the first book that I read this year, and it was such a hit for me. This is a sci-fi dystopian where Earth became uninhabitable to humans, so they built this gigantic spacecraft to transport humans to find another planet to live on. Since they were gonna be on the spacecraft for hundreds and hundreds of years, multiple generations, they basically allowed people to come onto the ship as contract workers so that eventually their descendants would be able to get onto this new planet. So we're following a main character who is multiple generations into this indentured servitude, and at the beginning of the book, she finds out actually that the ship is breaking down, and nobody knows about it. She's the only person who knows, and she's sort of figuring out throughout the book how to navigate finding out that information. And what I really loved about this was the world. The spacecraft was made to resemble Earth, so there are multiple different ecosystems in it. There's an underwater city, there's mountain ranges, there's a desert. It's very cool, and I really loved that. This was just, for me, the perfect book to start off my reading year with a favorite and a 5-star, and the end of this book made me cry so much. Next up, I have A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is a fictional book that is written as a memoir by this woman who is serving a life sentence in prison because she, not only was she a serial killer, but she also ate her victims. So she's sort of writing this memoir, telling her life story, all about her relationships and her killings. It is so fascinating. I loved the voice of Dorothy. She really felt like a real person, and even though she's a serial killer and a cannibal, she's kind of iconic. Like, some of the things that she was saying in this book, I was like, yes, queen, slay, eat the people. The next book that I have is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Shipeko. This is a gothic vampire fantasy about this world where we are following this vampire bounty hunter named Remy, and he discovers that there's this new, very deadly breed of vampires that are being created that are super monstrous and terrifying. So he ends up teaming up with a vampire lord and lady in order to investigate who is creating these new vampires. I feel like this book really blends everything that I love. It's fantasy, it's gothic, it has a historical, like, Regency vibe to it, it's horror, it's romance. There's a polyamorous relationship between Remy and the two vampires, and I just was obsessed with it. This is another book that I feel like is so perfectly like tailored to me and my tastes, and another book that I am dying to get my hands on the sequel. And then the last 2 books that I have are part of the same series, and that is Ninth House and Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. Am I super late to the Ninth House hype train? Yes, but I am here for it. I'm all aboard. I am obsessed. So for some reason, if you don't know, Ninth House follows a main character named Alex Stern, who gets the opportunity to attend Yale and join like this elite underground magical secret society group. And she joins Lethe House, who are basically like in charge of monitoring all of the other secret societies and making sure that everyone is following the rules. And then a bunch of girls start showing up dead on campus, and Alex finds herself in the middle of this investigation to figure out why these girls are dying. Alex also has this ability to see through like the veil, and she can see ghosts, which makes her very valuable to the society. I'm leaving so much out, but these books are just, oh my god, they're so good. Alex Stern is like one of my new favorite main characters. I love her, I'm obsessed with her, and I need Miss Leigh Bardugo to get on it. I need the next book. I don't want to wait like 4 years. So those were my top 10 favorite books of the year. Definitely let me know in the comments what is the best book that you have read so far this year. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon where I post tons of exclusive content. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!